First the stabbings, now the blame game, and today it's got political. The Prime Minister says the current surge in killings is not related to police cuts she made when she was Home Secretary. Many disagree. A death in Romford of a 17-year-old scout, another in Manchester the same weekend, has suddenly led to it being called a national crisis. But will that really change anything? Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
This is as close as her family can get to the spot where Jodie Chesney was murdered. Today they held on to each other tightly next to the growing collection of flowers and messages outside the police cordon. The tributes left here reflect the sense of disbelief on the Harold Hill estate near Romford.
I've got 3 young children. It's just really worrying. It's really worrying that this is going on in the area.
Jodie was described by one of her scout leaders today as an amazing young woman. In November, she represented her scout troop at the Festival of Remembrance in the Albert Hall. On Saturday night, she was with a group of friends in a children's play area at Harold Hill when a young man said to be in his late teens stabbed her in the back. Detectives have no idea why. The police think Jodie's killer ran towards this road next to the park. It was dark, but the street lights were on and many of the houses have security cameras. The police have started collecting footage from these and other cameras. They know a better description of the main suspect and the man he was with could give them a breakthrough.
On the night of the murder, between the hours of 7 and 11 p.m, there are many people who had the dash cam and potentially CCTV.
The local MP thinks Jodie's murder is further evidence that knife crime is migrating from inner city London to the outer suburbs.
I think we've seen, particularly in the Harold Hill area, people being intimidated more regularly, potentially with either the threat or the use of a knife. I don't think we saw that kind of thing previously.
Former Met Police Commissioner Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe has called for austerity cuts to be reversed. But the Prime Minister repeated her belief that police numbers and the crime rate are unconnected.
If you look at the figures, what you see is that there's no direct correlation between certain crimes and police numbers. What matters is how we ensure that the police are responding to these criminal acts when they take place.
Harold Hill's police station was closed in 2010. It's now a supermarket. Shoppers like Hilda Tennyson and Jean Clubb would like to turn back the clock.
I heard some boys whispering outside my house one night about what garages they'd burgled. And I phoned the police straight away and they told me, go down and ask them, see what they're doing. I would go down. I thought, what? This was 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought, no way, no way. So I just left it. Things get left.
It's bad, really, and there's no policeman on the beat now anyway. And that's used to be a safety measure, really.
Tonight, there's still no obvious motive for this apparently random and senseless murder. Simon Harris, ITV News, Harold Hill.
Simon is with me now. Look, this afternoon, the current Home Secretary, Sajid Javid, has been called to the Commons to answer questions about this violence at the moment that we're seeing.
Yes, we heard earlier from Julia Lopez, who's the local Conservative MP for the area where Jodie was murdered. And she stood up in the Commons, remember she's a Conservative MP, the same as the Home Secretary, and said there is a danger of the public losing faith with the authorities because of the spike in knife crime that's happening. Well, this was the Home Secretary's response to questions to him today.
We all wish that there was one thing, just one, that we could do to stop this violence. But there are no shortcuts. There is no one single solution. We must ensure that the police have the resources to combat serious violence. I'm raising police funding to record levels next year, up to £970 million more.
Nina, you know that living in London, the curse of violent crime has been obvious to everyone for more than a year, but you do get a sense that Jodie's murder and that of another teenager in Manchester over the weekend have caused the sort of headlines which now point to this being very much a national crisis.
Simon Harris, thank you very much. Thank you. But first, he's been hiring and firing on telly for years. Today, Lord Sugar said the UK needs to leave the EU with a deal. The business tycoon was in Croydon at the opening of the new multi-million-pound headquarters of Tropic, the skincare company which he set up with a former apprentice contestant. Well, Lord Sugar is a firm Remainer. Our political correspondent Simon Harris asked him if Brexit uncertainty made the new factory a wise investment.
Well, I've always gone against the grain, And this company is really gone against the grain. So anybody who says that business is not booming, this is a wrong example, because this place, we are booming.
What do you think's going to happen? What's your best guess?
I think that the full ramifications of it won't be clear for at least 10 to 15 years. The 29th of March is, so what? You know, on the 30th of March, you're not going to actually see anything significantly change. We do have to have a deal by then, and I'm hoping that common sense will prevail and that we have a deal that at least agrees for free movement of trade for at least the next 5 years while we can sort ourselves out, and free movement of people that can travel, not for work, but just can travel generally, you know, without having immigration papers and all that stuff.
You negotiate deals. What do you think of Theresa May's handling of this one?
I'm a good negotiator. I don't know the quality or level of the negotiations that were sent to Brussels, but I should imagine they were just lawyers, really.
Do you think London is prepared for what could happen in a couple of weeks' time?
We've got no choice. We have to be prepared. It's not as if the Luftwaffe is going to come and bomb us again, is it? It's just... We'll have to be prepared. I mean, as I said, what's going to happen on March 30th? The world's not going to collapse around us. The electricity's not going to go off, you know. The other people, you know, on the other 27, nothing's going to happen there either. We have to have a deal by the 29th.
But if there is no deal, you clearly would be concerned.
Well, it's impossible. We can't have a no-deal situation.
What would that mean?
Well, it's hypothetical. You know, it's like saying what would happen if someone dropped an atom bomb on England. It's hypothetical.
Well, at the moment, that's what's going to happen.
But I don't think it's going to happen. A no-deal thing would mean that on the 30th of March, you couldn't go to France. And a Frenchman couldn't come here, because we would have no agreement for immigration, for example. When we entered the country, they'd look at this passport and we'd say, we don't have an agreement with you, go away.
So you're sure that some sort of deal will happen?
I'm absolutely sure that we'll have to have some deal.
Lord Sugar, thanks for talking to us.
OK.
We've known for ages that Crossrail will be late. We still don't know when London's new railway will be open. And despite its chief executive being questioned by MPs today, we still don't know who or what is to blame for the delay either. So what did we find out? Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
The plastic covers flapping in the wind tell their own story. Underneath are passenger escalators which have never been used. Crossrail's sorry legacy so far is a chain of ghost stations still waiting for the first rush of commuters. This is Custom House, one of 10 new stations. 3 months after the Elizabeth line was supposed to be open, it's still not finished. None of them are, and that's only part of the problem. Towards the end of 2017, one of these transformers at an electrical substation in East London exploded. The loss of power caused a 3-month delay in the testing of the new trains. And there have also been a series of software snags with the railway's signals. In Parliament, MPs had one overriding question. Who is to blame? Lee Rowley, a former Westminster councillor, put it bluntly.
Who's responsible for this screw-up?
But the senior civil servants and Crossrail bosses called to give evidence declined to name names.
I can't single out any single individual or entity for being wholly responsible for this.
It's clear now, with hindsight, that the management team did not have a good enough grip or understanding of the work to do. When did you realise the board was inadequate?
I don't accept that language. This is a programme set up with a governance that doesn't, I'm afraid, allow one to simply pinpoint an individual.
In 2010, Crossrail was expected to cost £14.8 billion. Today it's risen to £17.6 billion, a £3 billion increase. The MPs wanted to know when it was obvious the project was in trouble. Mr Rowley read from an internal report from last April.
It is incredible for senior people, other than Mr Meggs, who wasn't involved, to sit here and tell me that you were not clear that this was going to fall over. It was perfectly clear.
I was very clear that there were risks around December, the December 18 date. I was very clear, and I was open in that in terms of the department, that there were risks around that date, but it looks like weeks, not months.
So when will Crossrail open? Next month we'll get some idea, but not a precise date. but definitely not this year. Simon Harris, ITV News, Silvertown.
Well, London's knife crime epidemic claimed another young life tonight. In the last hour, police have said a teenager has been stabbed to death in West Kensington. Last night, a 26-year-old man was killed in Leighton. And today in the Commons, the calls continued for the government to urgently free up resources for the police. We'll have the latest on that developing story in Kensington in just a moment. But first, here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
David Martinez was 26. Yesterday, he became yet another victim of violent London. The spot where he collapsed in Leighton was still covered by a police tent today. Just yards away, the block of flats where he was apparently stabbed. A woman who asked not to be filmed told me what happened.
The guy was actually running for his life. He came out from the block of flats and he collapsed right here. He had no shoes on, no jackets. We brought towels and blankets and we tried to stop the bleeding until the police came.
Susanna Ansar, who lives a few doors away, watched as police officers tried so hard to keep him alive.
I thought of his mother, I thought of his family, and I thought what a waste of a life. Whatever he got stabbed for couldn't have been worth that.
The police say they think Mr. Martinez knew his attacker, but what happened wasn't gang-related. The young man murdered in Leighton was the 15th Londoner to die in a knife crime this year. At Westminster, London Labour MPs again demanded more money for the police.
3 stabbings have occurred in my constituency since Monday. 2 young men were stabbed last night in Queen's Park, just yards from where I live. We have lost a third of our police since 2011.
You say goodbye to your son in the morning, and the next call you get is the call from the emergency services telling you that your child is a victim of violent crime.
This fear is absolutely why we are putting so much effort and support into local charities on the ground through our not our anti-knife crime community fund, but also our early intervention youth fund.
Not far from the killing in Leighton at the local sixth form college, the principal has decided to offer students lessons in self-defence and first aid. Many are worried about what might happen outside the safety of the campus.
They feel very vulnerable. I've got young men that talk about, when they make their journey to college, they don't make eye contact with anybody, because making eye contact with somebody in a borough that you don't live in can be dangerous, can be fatal. And young people should not be at the forefront of their mind when they travel to and from school and college every day.
Tonight, the death toll from knife violence in London is again rising. A man stabbed in Soho at the weekend has died in hospital.
London's knife crime epidemic has claimed the lives of 3 more young men in the last 24 hours alone. Tonight, a teenager was stabbed to death in West Kensington. Last night, a 26-year-old was killed in Leighton and a 37-year-old man was stabbed in Soho on Sunday morning. He died last night. There were further calls in the Commons today for the government to urgently free up more police resources. Here's our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
David Martinez was 26. Yesterday, he became yet another victim of violent London. The spot where he collapsed in Leighton was still covered by a police tent today. Just yards away, the block of flats where he was apparently stabbed. A woman who asked not to be filmed told me what happened.
The guy was actually running for his life. He came out from the block of flats and he collapsed right here. He had no shoes on, no jackets. We brought towels and blankets and we tried to stop the bleeding until the police came.
Susanna Ansar, who lives a few doors away, watched as police officers tried so hard to keep him alive.
I thought of his mother, I thought of his family, and I thought what a waste of a life. Whatever he got stabbed for couldn't have been worth that.
The police say they think Mr. Martinez knew his attacker, but what happened wasn't gang-related.
You say goodbye to your son in the morning, and the next call you get is the call from the emergency services telling you that your child is a victim of violent crime.
This fear is absolutely why we are putting so much effort and support into local charities on the ground through our not our anti-knife crime community fund, but also our early intervention youth fund.
Not far from the killing in Leighton at the local sixth form college, the principal has decided to offer students lessons in self-defence and first aid. Many are worried about what might happen outside the safety of the campus.
They feel very vulnerable. I've got young men that talk about, when they make their journey to college, they don't make eye contact with anybody, because making eye contact with somebody in a borough that you don't live in can be dangerous, can be fatal. And young people should not be at the forefront of their mind when they travel to and from school and college every day.
The death toll in London continues to rise. A man stabbed in Soho at the weekend died in hospital last night. And tonight, news of yet another victim. A teenager was stabbed in the chest here in West Kensington. The air ambulance was called, but doctors were unable to save him. Simon Harris, ITV News, West Kensington.
Good evening. A deadly 7 days in the capital has ended as it began, with another family grieving the loss of a teenager stabbed to death on London's streets. Ayub Hassan was murdered last night in West Kensington. The family friend told us it was the fourth time someone had made an attempt on his life. On the other side of London, in Romford, friends of Jodie Chesney remembered her with tributes at her school today, a week on from her death. Arrests were made today in both cases. Our correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Landfrey Place is a quiet cul-de-sac where houses sell for more than £1 million. But when it comes to knife crime, nowhere in London is too exclusive. This is where the latest victim was stabbed to death. Ayub Hassan was 17, a student with ambitions of being a barrister, and it appears a young man with enemies. Amina Osman, a family friend, spoke of 3 previous attempts on his life. The first left him unconscious in a park.
The second time, he was stabbed. The third time, he was run over. And this is the fourth time he's killed, and he's only 17. And he had ambitions. He was looking forward to be a barrister.
Police attention today focused on a door to a secluded passageway, which people living in the street are convinced is used for drug deals. Ayub Hassan was with 3 friends when he was attacked. Neighbours answered their cries for help.
A wonderful nurse took care of the situation. She was so professional and managed all the first aid until the paramedics arrived. So, yeah, we just did everything we could to help, but sadly, I gather it was too late.
Members of the local Somali community came to pay their respects. They said Ayub's mother collapsed when she heard the news of his murder.
I was so really shocked, and I said, I hope it wouldn't be a Somalian boy. But when I went home, around 4 o'clock, I've heard it was a Somalian boy.
The death toll in London in the space of 7 days has included 2 college students, both 17 years old. This has been the deadliest week in London so far this year. While the politicians argued about how to tackle knife crime and what's behind it, another 5 people lost their lives. Last Friday, Jodie Chesney was stabbed in Harold Hill. On Saturday, Elise Stevens died in Hendon. Police haven't named the man stabbed in Soho on Sunday. On Wednesday, David Martinez Valencia was murdered in Leighton. And yesterday, Ayub Hassan in West Kensington. In Dagenham, Jodie's boyfriend Eddie Coyle joined other students at her college to remember her this morning. There was also a minute's silence outside the town hall. Labour MPs wrote to the Chancellor today calling for more money to allow the Met to reinstate neighbourhood police teams axed in cutbacks.
They not only provide reassurance, they provided local intelligence, and they made sure they knew, putting it crudely, who the good guys and who the bad guys were in any local community. That's the thing that people say to me most of all.
Tonight, Scotland Yard said 4 teenagers were being questioned about Ayub Hassan's murder. 2 of them are 15, the other 2, 17 and 18.
Simon, so many deaths in just a week. What is being done now to reassure the public?
Well, it's Friday night, the start of the weekend. For many Londoners, it's the cue to start relaxing, but that's not a luxury the police can afford, far from it. Tonight, in 4 London boroughs, special measures are being adopted to allow them to carry out stop and searches without suspicion. Basically, normal rules are being suspended, and all that senior officers need is a reasonable belief that violence is about to occur. It's going to apply here in Hammersmith and Fulham, next door in Ealing, in parts of Kensington and Chelsea, and in parts of Westminster. And that's a tactic that will go on until 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. The police say at the moment stop and searches are running at around about, this week anyway, around about 1,000 a day.
All right. Simon Harris in West Kensington, thank you.